really delighted to look out at this amazing crowd and see so many of the people who we're counting on to make the mayor's housing plan really work and be a reality. And you all have been terrific partners. As many of you know, the process leading up to the housing plan, and let me just talk for a minute about that, was really an extraordinary one because, first of all, it came right out of Deputy Mayor Glenn's office, and so it had, from the get-go, both her support and the mayor's support, and it was very clear that it was an administration priority and that everybody had to be at the table, all the agencies that touch housing or all of the things that go with housing, from jobs to infrastructure, that everybody had to be at the table and that it had to be an all hands on deck effort. And so it was an extraordinary partnership among really 13 different agencies that touch housing in some way or the other. But it was also an extraordinary partnership with so many of you in the room. We invited people into City Hall. We met with people constantly. Shinny was an absolutely critical partner, as was the coalition, as were so many of you in really helping us think about what do we really need to do here, what's possible, where can we push the envelope, what can be done. And the plan is just the announcement. Of course, now we have to make it work, and we're going to continue to rely on both the dedication and just the smarts of all of you here in the room, your experience, your creative thinking, you're really working to push harder and harder for us to be able to do more and to make this ambitious plan a reality is something that we're all very much counting on. Whoops. The deputy mayor talked a little bit this morning about the plan, and of course you've probably heard more about the plan than maybe you want. But let me just focus on a couple of the key guiding principles, and then I want to really get right into a little bit more specifics about the supportive housing and housing for the homeless issues. The way that we really tackled the issue is that we started where the Furman Center has taught me to start, which is that we really looked hard at what is the problem, what are the demographics, what are the changes here, what are we facing? And on the basis of that analysis of the housing gap, the incredible rent burdens, the incredible strain on our homeless shelters, all of those issues, the changing demographics, the growing number of seniors that we have in the city, all of those things, we really came forward with a set of guiding principles. And the very first principle was we had to address the changing demographics of our city, both the aging of our city, the increase in the number of homelessness, in the number of homeless, the increase in the number of single member households. All of those things we had to work harder to try to address in the housing plan. The other part of that was really that we had to expand the range of people that we were serving, both to serve the very poorest of households, and as Alicia said this morning, we committed to quadruple the number of units that we're building or preserving for the very lowest income. At the same time, we recognized that in order to build diverse and strong neighborhoods, we really also have to be working on that moderate income and middle income, the families, the teachers, the firefighters, the police officers that are the backbone of our economy. We also have to be bringing into neighborhoods and really diversifying the neighborhoods in very important ways. The second basic principle is that we have to rethink the way that we're doing land use. And in part that's about greater density, really building for the demographics that we have and for the growth that we depend on and we rely on to make the city strong. So we've got to build density, but we also have to do it in a smarter way, where we're not just putting housing in the neighborhood, but we're using that housing really as the cornerstone for the infrastructure, the schools, the parks, the police stations, the fire stations, all of the things that have to be there in order to make that housing provide a livable neighborhood, not just a dense neighborhood. So we're really going to be focusing on a holistic approach to bringing the infrastructure, bringing the jobs, bringing the schools, all of the things that need to be there, not just the housing. And we're going to be doing that in conjunction with each and every neighborhood, so that we're talking with the neighborhoods, we're engaging with the neighborhoods about the ways in which we can leverage our investments, the city's investments, the state and federal investments, to help that neighborhood achieve whatever it is that it wants to achieve. And every neighborhood is different, we understand that, and we have to be working to make our investments work with that neighborhood. The third key principle goes back to something that I was saying with the first, is that the cornerstone of this has to be making every neighborhood economically diverse and strong for its residents. We're saying very clearly in the plan, we are not giving up on any neighborhood. We are not saying that any neighborhood doesn't have performing schools or doesn't have the parks that it needs or any of those things. We're going to make every neighborhood in New York a place where people can thrive, a place where people have opportunities for schools, for education, for jobs. And so that's a basic principle about making every neighborhood an economically diverse and a thriving neighborhood. We realize that we are often part of the problem, and we're going to clean up our own act. So we're going to use the city's tools and our assets more efficiently, more effectively. We're going to be looking at our processes, trying to streamline them, trying to remove some of the regulatory barriers and impediments that drive you all crazy. We're going to be trying to work very strategically to lock in affordability, to recognize that when we bring improvements to a neighborhood, when we invest in neighborhoods, it often increases housing prices, which is a sign that it's working, a sign that it's making the neighborhood more livable, more desirable, but also causes a lot of problems for the people who need to stay in that neighborhood, who want to stay in that neighborhood. So we're going to work very strategically to try to preserve our past housing investments and lock in affordability in changing neighborhoods. We recognize that there's been an incredible outflow of affordable housing, right? As rent-regulated units have expired out of rent regulation or have vacancy decontrolled, et cetera, we've lost a tremendous number of affordable housing units, and we realize that we have to stop that, and we're going to work very hard to protect the tenants, the rights of the tenants who are in those rent-regulated units, and to stem the tide of deregulation that we've faced over the last, really since 1993 when the program was changed. We know that we have a limited period of time to do this. We've got favorable markets. We've got to jump on them. And we realize that the city has to put its own dollars behind a lot of this. We need our federal partners. We need our state partners. We're delighted to hear this morning about the state partnership, but we also have to put substantial city dollars, and we did that. I'm going to, as you know, it's a very ambitious plan for 200,000 units built or preserved over 10 years. We see the total city investment over that period of time being about $8.2 billion. The mayor already doubled the capital commitment for the next 5 years to start to make good on that city investment. About 60% will be preservation and about 40% will be new construction, so that's 80,000 new units of housing. As I said, we're going to quadruple the number of units that are targeted to those very lowest income, the below 30%, and we're also going to be targeting increases in the moderate income areas. But let me talk just a minute more about the specifics in terms of what we're doing for housing for special needs populations, whether it be the homeless, senior citizens, or supportive housing or accessible housing. As you know much better than I, the numbers are frightening. The crisis is horrific. Our shelter population, unfortunately, has increased beyond 50,000 people. That's a terrible number, and we know, especially for the 22,000 children and the 10,000 families that are in those shelters, that we have to do more to get those families out of shelter into permanent housing. We know that by 2040, the number of New Yorkers over the age of 65 will increase by more than 40% to 1.4 million people, and we have to provide housing for those senior citizens. And of course, we also know that about 10% of the city's total population, or about 850,000 people, are living with some form of disability and often need housing that makes living with that disability easier. The enormity and the complexity of that task is something that we are well aware of. We understand that it requires a very targeted, a very efficient, a very smart response, and a very, to go back to Bill Traylor's readings this morning, a very empathetic and compassionate response. In terms of assisting homeless individuals and families, the first tenet is that we have to prevent homelessness before it happens. And so you have a commitment from all agencies of the city to try to do more to prevent people from being evicted, to keep people in their homes and prevent homelessness from ever happening. So we will be ramping up anti-eviction legal services, neighborhood-based housing stabilization services, aftercare to prevent homeless families that have been moved into permanent housing from ending up back in the shelters. We'll be really ramping up all of that. We'll be looking at some creative approaches to shelter finance. You all know better than anybody that our current shelter finance models we need a new approach. And we're going to be piloting new models of shelter finance using long-term contracts to leverage mainstream sources of financing such as tax credits, experimenting with some 501c3 bonds issued by HDC, leveraging better private bank financing. And we're going to be, we're committing to better coordination among all of the agencies on the shelter systems and on those permanent units. We know that we are not doing a good enough job of moving the homeless into our set-aside units, into supportive housing. We're doing everything we can to try to reduce those bottlenecks, move people in much more quickly, and keep those units reserved for the formerly homeless and reserved for the supportive housing families. We know we have to make better use of our subsidized housing resources. NYCHA, as you know, is reinstating its preference for homeless families. We've set aside units, as I said, for the homeless, and we'll be working to make that process work more efficiently and more seamlessly. At the same time, as I said, we're going to be working across agencies, both on supportive housing and on homeless housing, to reduce those bottlenecks. In terms of new supportive housing units, we're committing to do more than we've ever done, and look forward to working. The incredible announcement this morning is really very heartening. We look forward to working with the state on a new housing agreement and to producing a lot more units as a result of that. We're going to try to make that easier by removing some of the zoning impediments that have gotten in the way, by removing some of the regulatory impediments more generally that have gotten in the way. So those are some of the things. I don't want to take up too much of our time. So those are some of the specifics about the things that we will be doing. We, again, look forward to working with all of you. Keep us posted on what we're not doing. Keep us posted on what needs more tweaking. Keep us posted on new things that you think of. And I really look forward to working with all of you on this as we go forward over the next 10 years. So thank you.